I want to begin this morning with a question, just by a show of hands. Kind of curious. Anybody in here ever lost something before in your life? Okay, if you're not raising your hand, you're lying, right? This is a universal human experience, right? And you always lose the thing at the most inopportune time, right? You always lose your keys when you're already running late for school or work, and you got to hunt all over the house, right? To try to get the kids to school or to try to get yourself to work. Or how about this one? Anybody in here ever lose their wallet? That's a stressful experience, right? Because you got your ID in there, your credit cards in there, you got some cash in there. Or this one these days may even be more stressful than losing your wallet. Anybody ever lose their cell phone, right? That's a downright catastrophe and crisis. Because I don't know about you, but like my whole life, literally pretty much all the time, is on my cell phone, right? We're using it for everything these days. Sometimes you lose something and it's not even your fault. If you ever do traveling, you ever had the airlines lose your luggage before? Okay? You get to wherever it is you're going, you don't even have a toothbrush because somebody on the opposite end of the country has all your personal belongings. Or if you travel, maybe you've lost your car before because you park in the airport parking lot, right? And then when you get back from your trip, you can't remember where you parked, so you're going through multiple levels of the parking garage looking for your car or your truck. Or how about this one? Parents in the room, be honest. You ever lost one of your kids before? Come on. Yeah, it's happened. I'm sure it has. Because it just takes a split second, doesn't it, right? You turn around and all of a sudden they're gone. And you got to call their name, searching frantically and frenetically for them. So in my house, we actually have an item that is perennially lost. It gets lost all the time. Brought a picture of the item for you. This is a picture of a blue elephant blanket. This blue elephant blanket has a name. His name is Ellie, and he belongs to my son, Hayden. Hayden has had Ellie since he was a little baby, and Ellie is always getting lost. He's been lost under the couch. He's been lost in the couch cushions. He's been lost under the bed. He's been lost on a shelf. He's been lost in the pantry. He's been lost in the laundry hamper. He's been lost in the bathroom. He's been lost in the car. He's been lost outside. But here's the good news about Ellie. Ellie's been lost many times, but so far, he's always been thankfully found. Ellie's been lost, but he's never quite been lost for good. And that's good, because if Ellie was to be lost for good, that would be bad because my son Hayden would be sad. So all across the world, churches are declaring and proclaiming a very simple truth. And the truth is this: Christ is risen. But I'll tell you, the story of that first Easter, the story of that first proclamation did not start with joy. It did not start with peace. It did not start with hope. The story of that first Easter instead started with a loss. Because before anybody knew that Christ had risen, his closest followers thought that Christ was lost. And not just lost, they thought that he was lost for good. And that was bad. And everyone who knew him and loved him and followed him was walking around with grief, very, very sad. Here's how the story unfolds. Back to Luke 24, verse 1, on the first day of the week, very early in the morning. There are these women who are taking spices that they had prepared, and they're going to the tomb of Jesus. I want to pause right there, just set a little bit of context here for you. So as the story of the first Easter opens, we have these women. Most scholars think there were 3 of them. Okay, there was Mary Magdalene, who was one of Jesus' closest followers and friends. Then there was also a woman named Salome. Salome was the mother of 2 of Jesus' disciples, James and John. And then there was another Mary who was the mother of Jesus. And these 3 women, they're going to Jesus' tomb early on a Sunday morning. Now, you also need to understand this. When somebody was buried after they died, you wouldn't bury them in the ground. You would actually place their body in a cave. That's the way you would bury people back then. Now, because they didn't have modern embalming technology, something would happen fairly rapidly, okay, to that body in the cave. It would begin to decay, and it would begin to, not smell so good. And that's why these three women are bringing all of these spices to the tomb, because one of the ways that you would honor the memory of your loved one, care for the remains of your loved one, is you would put spices on their remains to help them smell a little bit better as they eventually went the way of the earth. But as these three women come to this tomb on this Sunday morning, they find something that they never bargained for. They discover something that they never expected. Luke 24, verse 2, they found that the stone that was placed in front of the tomb, because that was kind of a modesty measure, right? You put the stone in front of the tomb because you don't want an open grave. Well, they find that the stone that was placed in front of the tomb was rolled away from the tomb. And when they entered, verse 3, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. Now, when these three women go to this tomb on this Sunday morning, things are already really, really bad. Because the fact of the matter is, these three women are just sure that they have lost their best friend, they have lost their teacher, they have lost their mentor, they have lost a family member in a lot of cases. They have lost somebody that they hoped would actually be the Jewish Messiah, who the ancient Jews believed was going to come and be the Savior of the whole world. But now, when they get to this tomb, they cannot even find the body of Jesus. It turns out that Jesus' remains no longer remain. And so they can't even properly care for his body. And they're completely crushed because they don't know where his body's gone. In fact, the response of these three women, I think, is very instructive for us today, because here's the way they respond. Verse 4, while they were wondering about this. I want to do a little bit of technical work here for you this morning. The New Testament, originally written in Greek, I want to give you a little Greek word, the Greek word for wondering. It's the word aphoreo. Now, it's made up of two different parts, okay? There's the word pareo, which is a Greek word that means like road or path or way. And then you put an A in front of it, and that turns it into its opposite, kind of like an atheist to somebody who's not a theist, somebody who doesn't believe in God. And so, if you are aporeo, it basically means that in your life, you've hit a dead-end road. You've gone to the end of the path. You have no way forward and no way out. And that's exactly how these women feel. Because the reality was this. When Jesus died, their way died with him. Their path died with him. Their hopes died with him when he was lost by dying on a cross. Now, it's here where I think this story gets very relevant for us today. Because, yeah, we've all lost things in this room. But sometimes the losses that we incur are so deep and so profound and so difficult that we're left just like these women were left. We're left aporeo. We're left with no way out and no way forward. Maybe you're here this morning and the thing you've lost is your health. You go to the doctor. You thought it was a routine checkup, but then the doctor sees a little something in some test that he doesn't like very much, and so he sends you to the oncologist. And you wind up with a diagnosis of cancer. And it's not good. They're not sure they can heal it or solve it, even after chemo, radiation, surgery. And it's at this point where you're feeling aporeo. Because you're beginning to think that there's no way that you're ever going to be able to heal. There's no way that you're ever going to be able to recover. You got no way out and no way forward. Maybe you're here this morning and your big loss is the loss of a relationship. Maybe with your spouse or with one of your kids, with one of your grandkids, a friend. Things used to be so good, but then something went wrong and something went south. And you've tried everything you know to fix it. You've apologized, you've begged, you've pleaded. Maybe you've even offered to go to like relationship counseling with them. But no matter what you offer to do, they keep drifting further and further away from you. And you begin to feel apareo. You begin to think that there's no way that relationship is ever going to be repaired or restored. There's no way forward. There's no way out. Maybe you're here this morning, and honestly, your loss is a little bit more spiritual in nature. Maybe you feel like you've lost your innocence, or you've lost your integrity because of that thing that you did that you knew you shouldn't have done. And even if it's many years later, you still carry around with you a measure of guilt and shame, remorse and regret that crushes your heart and sticks in your soul. And maybe you feel apareo. Maybe you feel like there's no way that even God can forgive you. There's no way that even God can have grace for you. You know, this is you. If this is the kind of loss that you've encountered and experienced, I want you to know something. The story of Easter is for you. Because the promise of Easter is this. Even when you encounter your worst loss, all is not lost. Because when you feel like you're apareo, when you feel like there's just no way, you know what God has for you? He has a pareo. He has a way forward for you, which is exactly what he gives to these women. The story continues, Luke 24, verse 4. While they're wondering about this, while they're thinking there's no way forward, suddenly 2 men in clothes that gleamed like lightning stood beside them. In their fright, the women bowed down with their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? Christ is not here. He is risen." You know that man who you thought was a complete loss when he died on a cross? Well, guess what? He's back. Jesus is alive, these 2 men say to these 3 women. You know, if you're a guest with us this morning, I do want to take just a moment to welcome you. I am so glad that you're here. If this is your first time at Zion, I am delighted that you're worshiping with us. And I just want to give you an invitation. Please come on back. I hope you find Zion to be a hopeful and a helpful place for you in your life. Now, different people come to church on Easter for different reasons, right? Maybe you're here this morning just because you woke up and you said, yeah, it's Easter. I've got to go to church, right? You're always in church, but especially on Easter, you got to be in church. Maybe you're here this morning because somebody invited you and you're kind of excited to be here. You had a relative or a friend say, come with me, and you're here and you're having a great time with your family. Maybe you're here because somebody invited you forcefully. Has that ever happened to you, right? You know, you're staying with a relative, right? Aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa, mom, dad, and they say, well, in our house, we go to church on Easter. And you're thinking, well, I'm not really the church-going type, you know. But you're here. If that's you, can I just talk to you for just a second? The story of Easter, if you just take a step back from it, okay? It's a strange story. And here's why. Anybody in here ever read like comic books growing up? Anybody? Superheroes, all that kind of stuff? Okay. If you just step back from it, that's almost what it sounds like, right? That's almost what it feels like. There's this guy who dies, and here's a superpower. He can come back to life. And maybe you've kind of always struggled with that. Maybe you come to church all the time and you still struggle with that a little bit, right? I mean, the story sounds nice, it sounds hopeful, but just because something sounds nice doesn't actually make it true. Maybe that's the question that you're wrestling with. If you are, I want you to know something this morning. You are in very good company. And here's the reason why. The very first people to struggle with the reality of the story of Easter are actually the people who are in the story of Easter. The very first people to struggle with the reality of the resurrection are the people who are in the story of the resurrection. I think maybe we live with kind of this historical myth that goes something like this, okay? Way back in the first century, this was pre the Enlightenment and pre college and pre-science and pre-biology. And so back then, people were kind of naive and gullible, and so they could be snookered into believing that somebody who is dead can come back to life. But of course, this isn't the first century, this is the 21st century. And we are much more enlightened. We are much more educated. We understand science, and we understand biology, and we go to college, and we get degrees and PhDs, and so we are smart, and we know that once you're dead, you stay that way. That's the only way that it works. Now, here's the thing. That really is a historical myth, and here's why. In the Roman Empire, of which Israel was a part in the first century, the average life expectancy was 35 years of age. 35 years old. There was a high infant mortality rate. There were plagues, there were diseases that took people from families all the time. If anybody understood the reality of death, even better than we did, because they saw it all the time, it was people who lived in the era that this story happened. And here's the thing, they weren't dumb. They knew that once you were dead, you were done. They knew that dead people tended to stay that way. Which is why when these two men appear to these three women in this open tomb, right after they say to these women, Christ is not here, he's risen, that they continue in Luke 24, verse 6. Remember what he told you? While he was still in Galilee, he actually told you that this was going to happen. The Son of Man, he said, must be delivered over to the hands of sinners, be crucified, and on the third day be raised again. He told you he was going to come back to life. And then I love this next verse, verse 8. Then, after the men said this to them, they remembered his words. Okay, just by a quick show of hands, okay? If somebody said to you, I'm going to die and come back to life, how many of you would forget that? Anybody? You'd go, what? Right? Do you need some help? Right? Go see a doctor? And yet these women forgot what Jesus said. You know why? Because they didn't believe what Jesus said. Because they knew before he died that once you were dead, you were done. That was it. I can tell you what never happened, okay, on the very first Easter. It was not like New Year's Eve. There was not a group of people outside Jesus' tomb early Sunday morning counting back from 10. That was not happening, okay? 10, 9, 8. All of a sudden the ground begins to rumble. 7, 6, 5. You got the special effects with the little light beams coming out of the tomb, right? 4, 3, 2. The rock begins to roll. 1, everybody says, Christ is risen. Happy Easter. And you got the party hats and the blowers. Nobody was there because nobody saw it coming. You know how many followers Jesus had after he died on the cross? None. You know how many people believed that Jesus was the Son of God after he died on the cross? None. You know how many theologians were writing books about Jesus and talking about how he fulfilled ancient prophecy? None. But then something happened that nobody expected that changed everything. And that thing that happened has completely reshaped history. That thing that happened spawned a group of followers who was so devoted to Jesus that they would even die for the one who died for them. That thing that happened created a group of people that gathered with more and more people until groups of people all over the world, we call it the church, are still meeting to celebrate what happened on that day. That thing that happened inspired people like Matthew and Mark and Luke and John and a guy named Paul to write all sorts of books that we now have in this book. Something happened that nobody expected that changed everything. And so here's the question I gotta ask you if you struggle with this story. What if it's true? What if it's true? What would that mean for you? Because if Jesus can rise from the dead, what else can he do? That relationship you think is lost. You think maybe Jesus could repair it? That disease you think might just be the death of you. You think that Jesus might just be able to help you with it and heal you from it? That sin, the thing that you did that you carry around with you, that you can't forgive yourself for, you think Jesus might be able to have enough grace to cover it? What if it's true? What would that mean for you? You know what I love the best about this story? I actually love the ending of this story. Because the ending leaves these women in kind of an awkward position, okay? And here's their awkward position. They've gone into an empty tomb, and they've seen a couple of men. And these couple of men have given to them a message, a declaration. And the message in the declaration is that Christ is alive. Christ is risen. But here's the thing. Even though they have the message, they haven't seen the risen Jesus. At least not yet. And so they kind of got to struggle with something at this moment in the story. Are they going to believe the message of the men? Or are they just going to say, man, that must have been a bad enchilada last night and I'm having a trippy vision, right? That's the struggle. And where these women were is actually the exact same point in the story that we are. Because for 2,000 years, the Christian church has had a proclamation that Jesus is alive, Christ is risen, and now, here's the struggle. Are you going to believe the message? Or are you going to dismiss it and just say, there's no way that can possibly be true? Here's one way to kind of wrestle through this, okay? I have this friend. I've known him for almost 20 years now. His name is Adam. And Adam was the guy who was like standing right here just a few minutes ago. And he, along with a bunch of musicians, have been working really hard to put all of these services together, from the strings to the vocals. We had our traditional service earlier today, our sunrise service earlier today. Adam has kind of been the mastermind behind all of that. So can we just thank him and all of our musicians? And I thanked him, so now I'm going to tell a story about him, okay? So Adam actually lives in Houston. He's been driving in from Houston to help us out at Zion here, especially as we get into the Holy Week and Easter and all of that stuff. And yeah, see, here he comes right now. So I told him to walk up at this point, okay? And so he's been driving in from Houston, and he was actually here last Sunday, okay? He played at this service. And about Tuesday, I get a phone call from Adam. And he says to me, hey, I think I left my iPad right here in the worship center, right over there on that piano. Would you mind going and looking for it for me? Because, he was back in Houston. And so, I come on down the hallway, and I start looking over here by the piano for his iPad. It's not there. But you know what? I'm a good friend. I'm going to go above and beyond. So you know what I do? I start walking around the platform, seeing if I could find the iPad, and walk down the steps and start, circling around all the chairs, seeing if I can find the iPad, go behind the stone wall, see if it's back there, go back to the sound booth, see if it's back there. This iPad is nowhere to be found. And so I call him up and I say, dude, I'm sorry. I know you thought you left your iPad here, but it's lost somewhere in Houston. And he says, I don't think it is. And I say, well, I've looked everywhere, and it is not there. Well, it turns out that on his iPhone, Adam has this little, Find My iPad thing. And according to Find My iPad on his iPhone, you know where his iPad was? Zion Lutheran Church in Walberg, Texas. And I say, well, I don't care what your iPhone says. This thing is not here. And so he says, okay, so here's what I can do. Here's what I can do. I can actually ping my iPad, so it'll make a noise, and that way, if it's there, you can hear it. I say, fine. So he's sends a signal to his iPad, and you know what I hear? Nothing. I'm thinking, yeah, see? I know a thing or two. Well, as I'm listening to nothing, all of a sudden, I get a text from Adam. And it's a screenshot of where his iPad says it is according to his iPhone. Now, I want you to notice something down there at the bottom, okay? What does that say? It says sound pending. Apparently, it takes 30 seconds for this thing to start going off. And then right after that, he sends me this text because he's getting a little frustrated. Yeah. And honestly, what he's doing, right, I'm doing because I'm like, come on, man. There's no way this iPad is in here. I still haven't heard a thing. And then all of a sudden, out of the darkness of a vacant worship center, you know what I hear? Ping. Where'd that come from? And so I start walking all around the worship center. I walk back around the chairs and back to the sound booth. I walk back around to the back. And then I start walking up the steps of the platform, and I notice that the sound of the ping is getting a little louder. And so I'm kind of wandering around. And as I get close to the piano, it gets louder and louder and louder and louder. And I swear it wasn't there 30 seconds ago. But you know where the iPad was? Right there on the piano. It's like I'm at home with my wife, for crying out loud. You know how this works, right? Okay? Your wife says, hey, can you go get some milk out of the fridge? And you open up the fridge, right? And you know what isn't there? The milk. Okay. Melody walks up behind me, and what does she do? She just pulls the milk right out of the fridge because she can make stuff appear out of thin air. Adam Countryman has the same power. Same power. Now, in fairness to me, because I need to defend myself here for just a second, okay? The color of the piano is black. The color of Adam's iPad is black. It was a camouflaged iPad. What did he expect me to do? Here's the thing, okay? That sound, that little ping, was something that I could hear. And you know what it did? It pointed me towards something that was real and near, even if I couldn't see it yet. The proclamation of the church, Christ is risen. It's something that I think at least once or twice we've all heard. It's something that we can still hear. And so here's the question. Could it be that that proclamation is pointing us towards something that is real and near, even if we can't see the risen Christ yet? I want to wrap up with a Bible verse. Can you read this verse with me? These are words of Jesus from the Gospel of Matthew, Matthew 11, verse 15. Let's read them all together. Whoever has ears, let them hear. You know, that's a plea from Jesus. Here's what he's saying. You don't got to be super spiritual, super moral. You don't have to have your whole act cleaned up and your whole life put together. You just got to have 2 ears to hear and a heart to believe that I've risen. And when you hear that and believe that, everything changes. You know what? Jesus' plea is my prayer for you today. My prayer is this: that you would have ears to hear and a heart to believe that even if you don't see him yet, it's really true. Christ is risen. You know what? That's for real. And that's for you. Happy Easter. Let's stand and pray.